everybody! Welcome to Arrow on Target. We are your hosts.
You can find us online at stayontargetpodcast.com. I don't think we did that for the Flash on Target.
And we actually didn't give our Twitters either, so let's rectify that or correct that situation right now, Chris.
Yes. Chris Wright 250.
And John Wright 777.
So this week we're talking about the crossover between Flash and Arrow.
The epic crossover event.
If you listened to the Flash podcast, we're going to talk about the same kind of things for a second, not for very long, but
and if you haven't listened to that, you should go back and listen to it. There's a lot, especially for the first half of that podcast. It's Flash on Target, by the way. You can find stayontargetpodcast.com.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate. But we talked for the first 20 minutes or so about kind of the crossover implications and things.
Well, and we talked about we talked about Arrow's world, and so it's relevant to this podcast as well. So if you didn't watch the episode, the Flash episode, you should definitely go to CW. You can get it on their app or on their website and watch that episode.
Yeah. And if you don't care to watch the episode, you can still listen to the podcast, and it'll probably still make mostly
we don't recap
sense.
it.
Yeah, we don't.
We talk about important issues, I guess.
Right.
So the first thing that we wanted just to touch on real fast was that this crossover seems to do more for as far as viewership for Arrow.
Right.
But as far as moving the plot line forward and character development, it did more for Flash.
Yeah, but that's actually become more of a ongoing thing with Arrow. I think I compared it on the other one to they have a soccer field and they need to kick these 14 soccer balls from one side of the field to the other, and so they take one kick at a time on each soccer ball. And so it's we really didn't do much this episode for the entire plot of this season, really.
Right. Well, we've got, because we've got Who Killed Sarah. We've got...
which we did sort of make some... That was the entire premise behind them showing up to Starling City, was they were going to get this sample from Felicity.
That's true, but it didn't move it forward
No,
at all.
It didn't do anything for it. It just kind of gave you something to throw out there. And that's kind of what happened with Thea's plot line this episode too. Yeah. We saw almost an Easter egg of Thea walking down the road, and Flash runs past and she looks all confused.
Right.
Which was really funny because she's talking to that DJ that she kissed last week. Which means this isn't the last we've seen of that crazy DJ.
That's true. So we have, Thea's storyline, we have Malcolm Merlin's storyline, we have Who Killed Sarah, we have the League of Assassins coming to get him, we have whatever's going on with Amanda Waller, and we've got Ray Palmer, and we've got, it's just what in the world, guys? There's just so many storylines, and we need to start resolving them. I think I mentioned that it's unbelievable to me that next week is the mid-season finale.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Then we referenced last season's terrible mid-season finale, which was the courtroom episode.
Yes.
Which is definitively, you said.
That's what I said. You said arguably, but I said definitively it is the worst episode of Arrow to date.
Yes. So hopefully next week's episode is not the worst episode of Arrow.
No, I think it's gonna be awesome. I think we're gonna have to deal with one of these things. For it to officially be a mid-season finale, there has to have been some ground laid. You can't just have a really good self-contained episode.
I'll tell you what I hope it is. I hope it is mostly a self-contained episode, and then the last 15 minutes freaking blow my mind.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
They drop a bunch of bombs on you regarding these other storylines. You think that you're in a normal episode, but you're really not.
It's you're in a dream within a dream within a dream.
Exactly.
Arrowception.
Arrowception. I like it. Yes. So that's basically a recap of what we said, in terms of... let's lay out the viewership from Arrow. What did you say was the best?
It was other than the pilot, it was the highest rated episode of Arrow yet.
So it paid off, the crossover, I mentioned that... Flash, I think they positioned Flash before Arrow because Arrow doesn't necessarily have a new fan base just because of the high price of admission, and that you have to know all this backstory, not only of the current timeline, but also of the Island's timeline, and these villains that are now dead that you're not dealing with, and the other characters and family members and all that kind of stuff, the relationships. Honestly, if I jumped in right now, I feel like I would be very confused.
Overwhelmed, even.
Overwhelmed. And so I think it's a very daunting thing, and so there are a lot of people who hopped on board with the Flash because they know the Flash. It's a higher profile DC character, and they're trying to bring them into the Arrow fold.
Yeah, and
plus, I think it worked.
It's tonally a lot brighter, and so I think that we've even compared Flash to the audience that would be on for a Smallville.
Yeah.
And so if you get kind of that audience into there, then pulling back a curtain and saying, hey, but there's also this cool stuff going on in this universe, which was honestly like the funniest episode of Arrow that we've seen.
That's what I was going to say. You know, like we pulled kind of that comedic and just kind of fun atmosphere from The Flash into Arrow, and I liked it a lot.
Oh,
dude.
yeah, it was great.
I'm honestly okay if they kind of... I think sometimes they go too far into the drab and bleak area. It's fun to have... I mean, not fun. It's nice to have, you know, that kind of dark feeling to Starling City.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean the team needs to behave that way all the time.
Well, especially like with characters like Roy, who plays so well under the like comedy circumstances. Like this episode, if there was one thing that it showed me about, I guess, the supporting cast, is that Diggle and Roy can also be this comedic influence.
Yeah.
And, like, I mean, we've seen obviously Felicity, like she's kind of the comedian of the crew, if you get, you know, that. Diggle's got his one-liners, but it just seems like they could have like brighter happiness. Like there's so much dark stuff going on in this episode in particular. Like I mean,
it's a terrorist going to blow up the city.
Yeah, and he's like, and not only that, it's he's going after a specific person who's like personally involved with his team.
Yeah.
She knows who all of them are.
Yeah.
Even Barry now, which was hilarious.
Everyone, this is yes, an issue on both shows is the fact that that Iris doesn't know who Barry is on The Flash, and Thea doesn't know who Oliver is on Arrow.
But literally every other supporting character knows.
Everyone.
It's like,
there's not a single
guys.
one.
Come on. It's like me being a vigilante and literally telling everyone that I work with and everyone, but never telling you.
And I never figure it out.
Yeah, and you never realize.
It'd be so weird.
Why does he leave halfway through the podcast every week? I don't understand.
Yes. He comes back all bloody and hurt.
It's weird. He's always got like broken ribs and stuff.
Yeah. He's just clumsy.
Okay, so I did love that part where like we come back and Barry's chilling like with his mask off eating or whatever.
Right.
Because that sequence right there is the quintessential Flash.
Yes.
Like in everything, in the animated series, in the comic books, that is the attitude that the Flash just kind of has, where it's like, oh well, did I do something stupid? Who cares? You know, I'm already way past it. And he's already moved on and not thinking about it anymore. And so it's just, that was a really fun thing where he says, oh, but she's your wife, and he's like, no, she's not. You know, right. And he's like, but you tell her everything. And he says, you didn't tell her this. Oh, well, okay. You know, it just kind of goes on with it. So that was awesome.
I don't know. And do you get the feeling that they're both being pretty sloppy with their secret identities right now? Well,
okay, so Oliver really has, and the Twitter universe lit up whenever in the Flash episode Harrison figured out who it was. Obviously, he used his seen into the future device.
You think?
I guarantee he had to.
I mean, they didn't imply that.
No, they didn't imply that, but it was really easy. Even last episode on Arrow, that the person found out where he was stationed based on the response time to all of the disasters.
Right, that's true.
And so it's like you could really easily figure out at least the location, and then you just see who leaves and comes from that location. And sure enough, why does Oliver Queen go into this building 14 times a day?
Well,
you know?
I mean, we saw that this episode as well. Someone else has infiltrated the Arrow Cave.
Yeah, by backtracing a hack.
Yeah, so it's like they have to start being more careful. They're drawing a lot of attention to their location, to themselves. Do they move? Because and this is the thing, they just need to be more careful, because even if you move locations, they're going to attract attention there.
Yeah. And I wonder if maybe we're edging more and more towards more people finding out. You know, we've referenced before that it's in like the Bat universe, and even like last season, Quentin Detective Lance summarized it so well that he doesn't want to know who the Arrow is, and he doesn't. You know, he literally said exactly what was has always been on my mind about like people not wanting to know who Batman is, not wanting to know who Arrow is, where it's like, hey, it would be easy to figure it out, but so like I'm wondering if maybe they're edging more and more towards becoming kind of a public figure, of either Oliver Queen becoming more of the guy, or everybody knows that Oliver Queen is the Arrow and he's just on the run.
I don't know. You know, like whenever you talk about that, it makes me think of, you know, I am Iron Man. You know, I don't think we'll ever get to that point, just because his personality is not that.
And he's murdered tons of people.
He's murdered tons of people, and like he's not that kind of a character. You know, like he can't show up at parties and be, party as Arrow. Like it's not that kind of a thing.
Yeah. And I guess he has trouble telling his closest friends the truth. Why would he let the city know the truth?
Yeah, he has this thing about his identity. He also has this thing about not having any relationships. We forgot to talk about this on Flash.
It relates more directly to this show, but there's a few things on the Flash that relate only to Arrow.
He, Barry is having trouble, figuring out his relationship with Iris, and basically Barry or Oliver told him, let her go. We guys like us don't get to have those kinds of relationships, and that was just completely false. Like this, I'm tired of that. Tired of that kind of attitude.
Well, I think he was too, because Diggle had convinced him. Whenever we dealt with Cupid, Diggle had convinced him to go talk to her and go tell her. But then he shows up at her office and she's kissing Palmer, and it's like I think now he's just trying to keep himself sane at this point, like lying to himself.
All that though did was reinforce what he already believed. Diggle says, yes, it can work. Go make it work. He gets there and it's like, okay, well, obviously it doesn't work because if it was working, then she wouldn't be kissing Ray Palmer. Which
self-fulfilling prophecy. It's dumb.
I agree with that, but I think that's kind of like that's where he's probably at mentally.
Yeah, I agree. And the salmon ladder showed up this week.
That was amazing.
That was hilarious.
In a good way.
Yeah.
As opposed to the way with Ray Palmer.
Yes, that's 3 people we've seen on the salmon ladder this season, and 2 of them were awesome, and one of them was just like underwhelming.
Ridiculous.
Kind of weird. And awkward too.
Yeah.
It's like, who has other than the Arrow, who has a salmon ladder just chilling in their office?
That's true. And why?
Yeah, and does it come down from the ceiling for Ray, or what?
I don't know.
What's the deal? I wonder if he's just trying to be Oliver Queen. Maybe it was just there before he got there.
It could have been there. It could have been
because Oliver installed it.
Exactly. And he's like, "What is this? I can do it."
What is this thing?
Yeah. I can actually see that.
That's
a legitimate explanation for it.
That is really funny.
Yeah, that was really cool. I really liked the way that worked. I liked the interactions of. Let's talk about this for a second.
Okay.
So we discussed in the Flash how we didn't necessarily see the villain get taken down.
Right.
Okay. We didn't get to see them both take him down.
Right.
Which is what it was implied that it needed both of them to take him down.
Yeah.
This absolutely did require not only just Arrow and Flash, but the entire team.
All of the teams.
I loved that.
Oh, so cool.
What was missing in Flash, we got here.
Yeah, and it's weird to see that happen to where you have this blatant problem with the Flash episode, and then the other episode does it so beautifully.
Yeah,
orchestrates it, like you said, to where not only do we have to come together with just the main characters and deal with our differences, we have to come together as a team and deal with that,
Yeah.
And it was fun to see whenever they end up cutting the wire at the end. Everybody's reactions, they're flinching, they're they almost don't expect everybody else to take care of it, but since they do, it endears those characters to each other, as 2 separate teams, and obviously nobody's going to share anybody's identities at that point because they just saved each other's lives.
That just reinforces our thought that this should have been a part 1, part 2 episode where the first one led into the second one and they kind of intermingled a little bit more, because we said, I think what was lacking in each episode was present in the other episode, and make that work together in one long 2-part episode. Now, the first half may not be that exciting. It's a big build-up, Maybe that was the point. They didn't want, people who only watch The Flash to feel we just got gypped because we watched an hour worth of television and it didn't get anywhere.
Right.
But I think it would work so much better in terms of a crossover.
Agreed. So what's interesting about this is that if you look at comic books and the way they do crossover or big events sometimes, they'll have the main thing, but then it crosses over into all these other comic books. So say Batman is going in, and Batman the main line has this thing, this epic event, and then all of the Batgirl and all of the other side Batman comics are infected for 1 month with that storyline. This is the way that kind of felt, to where you have these self-contained 1-issue, 1-shot kind of storylines that maybe aren't as fleshed out as the main one, or aren't as good if they had worked together. separately, but like they are what they are. You know, they are a crossover event. And so like I think that they kind of approached it more from that type of standing than they did as from like maybe a movie standpoint or like a normal kind of a crossover thing. So
yeah, I agree with that. You know, and it definitely had that kind of feel, and that's fine. That's a legitimate way to do it. I just think the other one is more effective for television.
Right, I agree. And this episode, I will say, this episode did everything that the other one didn't do. You know, and so like I liked this one a lot better. I felt like it had more of a resolution.
You like this one better?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I actually I thought that the Flash episode was more fun. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed this one.
I gotcha.
This felt like more of a conventional Arrow episode, and aside from the cheat at the end where everything's all in a different spot and has to be deactivated at the same time.
Yeah.
This could have been a villain that Team Arrow takes down by themselves. So like it. After I get done saying, you know, like it required all the teams, and I really love the way it did. It could have worked out differently had they written it differently.
Right.
You know, and so it felt like more of a conventional. Didn't feel like as special of an episode or as fun of an episode.
I could see that because we didn't get as much of the shocking interplay like we did with like Diggle on the first episode. It's like that reaction alone was worth watching that episode of television. And so if you haven't seen it, Diggle's reaction to Barry's super speed is worth going back and watching that episode.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know. I agree with you. Like, it didn't feel as fun. But I guess my thing was, if we made this villain this threatening, to where, like, he got away from the Flash.
Yeah.
And he used, like, this is just a super trained soldier who uses boomerangs that explode. We should have made a super powered other guy strong enough to, you know, to basically deserve his own takedown or whatever.
Right.
You know, so it's like it was just a weird way that they framed the previous or the villain on Flash that I liked the way they did it with this guy. This guy felt real and threatening, and it's like while we sort of have this minor backstory to him where, you know, Argus tried to kill him and he's out for revenge.
Right.
I mean, you still, you know, you got this really threatening guy, and now he's in there with Slade.
Right.
That's crazy.
You know, the thing about the Flash, you know, like, you know, that episode we saw, you know, Barry is basically his own enemy in that episode. You know, like, the prism made him angry, but he had to, like, he was the enemy at that point,
right?
And Oliver had to take him down,
right?
And so that was the focus. Like, obviously, the name Flash versus Zero, they just wanted him to fight. That's the focus of that episode.
Right. Which they actually were gonna settle the argument at the end of this one. That was pretty fun.
And there was a difference between both these episodes. I thought was interesting as well, and I liked the way they did it on Flash whenever they were dealing with the way that Oliver behaves with criminals and his quote unquote torture methods. Right. And like I liked it because, you know, on Flash they alluded to it as like, okay, he's just crazy. Like Harrison said, he's crazy. You know, like. He's I guess tougher than anyone else in Central City.
Yeah.
And he goes back to Starling City and he does this. On the first episode, you don't have any problems with it. You know, like you're like, yeah, but he got the job done. That's what Barry says. He defends him.
Right.
On the second one, he's a little more uncomfortable with it. I honestly hope like this whole discussion of like, should I torture people or should I not, sounds unbelievably similar to should I kill people or should I not. And I'm sick and tired of these issues popping up on air all the time and all this self-doubt. Like, I feel like Oliver just mopes around all the time.
So what's funny about that is that I think we've completely dealt with it at this point.
I hope so.
Because even Oliver, like, or even Barry, like I mentioned on the other podcast that it's interesting because we get so desensitized to what Oliver has to do.
Yeah.
That whenever we see other people's reactions to what he has to do, it's like if, you know, Barry's standing there in the room with him while he's like shooting this guy with arrows and, you know, twisting it in his wound and almost pulling it out and stuff. And to see his reaction, it's like, yeah, I guess I would kind of be freaking out if I was in the room with him too whenever he was doing this.
And never seen it before.
Right, and yeah, I'd never seen this before. And only seen like the results or whatever. But honestly, I mean, I think that we've dealt with that because it's like Barry, while he had this tear in his mind where he says, this is not the person that I thought he was. Something that a way he's behaving is not in the way that I thought he was. And so he has to justify these two situations with it. And I think he summarized it really well at the end, which is in my quotes, whenever he said, let me pull it up exactly. He said, you were wrong when you told me I couldn't inspire people, and you couldn't. You can inspire. That was the arrow. I don't think that's the one. No, it's this one. You've convinced yourself that everything you've been through took away your humanity, but I think it's that because of your humanity that you made it through. So he had to like justify what he is doing with who he thought he was.
Right.
And so he had to rebuild basically who Oliver is.
Well, which is true. Oliver did what he had to do in order to survive, and this is still what he has to do in order to let the city survive.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of like, there's a different reason now, motivation, but the same kind of behavior. I agree with that, and I like that conversation. I just hope we don't bring it up again, because we delved in and out of this stuff, and it's like I don't always see the point. And we spend a lot more time on it than I think we should.
Yeah, and I think that, whenever Oliver gets to, like, whenever he's kicking himself, that's whenever we get, like, into weird territory,
right.
I think. It's because Oliver, this time, it's like he was totally okay, like, beating this guy up for info. But then the minute that it turned out that, hey, that info was actually what put them in jeopardy later on, he like started kicking himself. He's like, it's all my fault. And whenever he gets into those self-destructive spirals, it's kind of just, it's not fun to watch, I guess.
No, not at all. Like, I had more, from the perspective of how awesome was Oliver as Arrow. He was way cooler in the first episode, the Flash episode, than he was in this episode. Because in that episode, he's self-confident, he knows what he's doing, he does what he has to do to get done, he doesn't question himself. This one, he spends so much time being like, oh man, it's my fault, I shouldn't have done that. Just own up to it, and to realize that sometimes you're going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, don't mope around, and it's just not, you're like, right, it's not fun to watch.
Yes, it's not as fun to watch him whenever he's being, like, self-destructive.
No, and
like it's not fun to watch your friends be self-destructive, or your family members be self-destructive. It's like, it's just not fun to watch.
Sometimes, whenever we watch the show, it's like, I really honestly like the idea of Arrow more than I like Arrow. Like, I love the imagery behind Arrow and what he means. You failed the city.
You mean the hero?
The hero.
Yeah.
Than how they portray him and how Oliver acts.
Yeah, I think that you like the persona of Arrow, but maybe not Oliver Queen. Like, that's probably more.
I don't like the self-doubt of Oliver Queen.
Right.
And how back and forth he'll go.
Which, it's weird, and it's interesting, like, that's an interesting discussion about the duality of his character, where he's got this one side that is literally, he just does whatever it takes. And he even said that this episode, he's like, you just have to be willing to do whatever, whatever needs to be done, no matter the personal cost. Mm-hmm. And then you have the other side of him that constantly is at odds with that, where it's still that side of him from, previous to the island, where he's still that kid, where it's just like, man, what am I doing? I don't know if he ever really escaped that person.
Right.
And
I'm not going to say that that his superhero persona won't affect him as Oliver Queen, because it will. You see that in every superhero.
Right.
You think about Batman Begins and Bruce Wayne's mansion gets burned down.
Yeah.
You think about later on, he's gone into reclusion, and it's affecting his life on that level as well. And so
right.
You can go all through all the superheroes, and so I'm not saying that yes, he can be the Oliver Queen he wants to be.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he shouldn't be Oliver Queen.
Right.
And I hope that Barry's encouragement to did we already go over that quote? But the other quote was,
oh yeah, he says, "You were wrong when you told me I could inspire people and you couldn't. You were wrong. You can inspire, not as the Arrow. That guy's a douche." But it's Oliver Queen.
Yes.
I love it.
So I hope that's kind of more of a step into Oliver Queen coming back and actually doing, because I liked that.
I like seeing him kind of try to fight for his company, even though it was kind of half-hearted at the time.
Right.
It's, I like seeing him fight for that.
Yeah. Well, like in the first few seasons, we kind of all felt like Oliver Queen as a persona was almost an obstacle to him becoming Arrow.
Yeah.
But I'd love to see, like, you think about I think it's the pilot episode of Arrow, where there's that big welcome back party, and he's partying it up, and he leaves the party to go take down this bad guy, and then goes back to the party. That's the Oliver Queen I love.
Yeah.
Like, and I'd love to see that continue and reemerge as a part of his his personality and persona.
It very well might, because then whenever Cisco walked down on this episode, he said, "Man, he's like, you guys have a I think you guys could have more fun if you realize that you're right below a nightclub, you know."
Yes.
And so it's maybe that is kind of something that will come back into the forefront, where it's maybe we address the fact that, hey, he's he needs to do something as a day job or whatever, because we really don't have that side of him right now.
Right.
We only have the Arrow persona.
Right.
What did you think about the Thea situation, that she wasn't in this episode, or that she wasn't part of it? Was that a big deal to you, or was that like?
I mean, like I said, with all the storylines going on in Arrow, you have to put something on the back burner. Again, though, I will reiterate, she should be part of this team. He should tell her what's up, and she should know who he is.
Do you think that'll happen this season? Maybe.
I hope so. Like, the same thing needs to happen on Flash with Iris, and it needs to happen here with her. Because, like we said, I think we said on I can't remember now which podcast we said what on, but like it is literally affecting their relationship.
Yeah.
On multiple levels.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yes, they're on better terms than they were at the end of last season.
Right.
But it's still pretty terrible.
Yeah.
And, they're not going to fully connect until they realize that they both now have a pretty similar backstory. He doesn't know that she's being trained by Malcolm Merlyn. He needs to figure that out, too.
Oh, yeah.
But it just shows, like, he's not being observant enough.
And he's not spending any time with her, obviously.
No. We also didn't see, we didn't have any progression, really, in Laurel's storyline.
No, we didn't see her at all, basically, other than whenever he was talking to Detective Lance in the precinct.
Right.
But that was kind of that really didn't go anywhere.
No. I mean, so, like, on that level, it didn't necessarily bother me, because we were dealing with other characters. And so, it was honestly nice to step away from, like, the problems, like, that we've been dealing with, where it's just like, man, stupid Laurel, just, like, doing her own thing, not really thinking about consequences.
Right.
Oliver still not telling Thea. Like, it was good to take a step back from that and be like, okay, well, this is...
And just breathe for a minute.
Yeah, let's breathe.
And have a funny episode with lots of fun. It was nice to focus a little bit on Diggle and that relationship as well.
I love Diggle, man.
Dude, and it's Diggle is, like, one of my favorite characters, and I always feel like he's underused, but in this episode, it was just, like, it felt natural for him to be at kind of the forefront of this stuff.
Yeah.
He was in most of the action scenes. Yeah. Even if he didn't necessarily take anybody down, he was there. He was, working towards this thing. It was also good to see this emotional development where we're gonna have a Diggle wedding.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
I'm super excited for the Diggle.
Right.
This is gonna be a great situation as well. So, I don't know. It's like I'm really excited about where his character is going, and the fact that we dealt more with him. And even in both of these episodes, we saw a lot of Diggle.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So
I also like the motivation for the villain. Like the fact that he was in the Suicide Squad, and that's why he hates and has it out for Lila. Like that was a great motivation for why he's doing what he's doing.
Dude, and the title of this episode was The Brave and the Bold, which honestly has historically been a comic series of team-ups. And there was even Batman, the Brave and the Bold. They would launch that television show a few years back or whatever, and he would always team up with different people every episode. But basically, we've got the Brave and the Bold, and they not only bring those two characters together, but they bring the greater DC universe together with the Suicide Squad plot, which is really cool as well. And it'll be interesting to see if we see more members of the Suicide Squad this season. I don't know if we will.
Speaking of Suicide Squad, we'll talk about that on Stay on Target Podcast this week on our main podcast, StayOnTargetPodcast.com.
There it is.
But yes, like it was cool to see that, and I also took it to be like, okay, who was the brave one, who was the bold one?
That's very true. And it's interesting also to see the team before the Flash showed up.
Yeah.
That was an awesome sequence.
Yeah.
Where they show up to this dude's house and it's like Roy is there.
Yeah.
Diggle is there.
Yeah.
Oliver's there. Everybody's doing their jobs. It's like this is a well-oiled machine at this point.
Right.
And I'm excited about that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brave and bold, man.
And that's why I love Thea as a character, and I like her even more now that she can kick butt. And
yeah, she can fight now.
I'd love to see her join Team Arrow.
That'd be awesome.
I think there's gonna be a massive fight first.
That'd be crazy, dude.
Her and Merlin against Team Arrow.
You think she's actually gonna fight Oliver? Like I feel like that's gonna happen.
Yeah, that's gonna happen.
Yeah. They can't like set all this up and then not have that happen.
Right. So moving forward, I hope that there are more team ups like this. I hope they do this, more often, largely because they can do it and it not drastically affect the storylines, but it's still a lot of fun. It gives me, before it's kind of like, okay, we're working up to the mid-season finale, or we're working up to the season finale, and it's okay, like, well, give us something else in the middle of here to work up toward and to also enjoy along the way.
Right.
Not that they're, but it just, like, in 22 episode seasons, I was talking about this earlier, like, you think about things like The Walking Dead that have these, like, really truncated, like, half seasons, and then there's, like, huge breaks in between them. And then you think about...
Or even in things like Sherlock, or things that are British that have, like, even less episodes.
Yeah, Sherlock. Game of Thrones. You have True Detective, which was 8 episodes.
Yeah, like 6 episodes is a normal thing in like, the UK and stuff, and they get a lot done.
I love that. And then you have these 22 episode, 24 episode seasons, and it's just like, man, it just takes so long to get through this stuff. So give me more of this stuff along the way.
Oh, yeah.
To look forward to and to have fun watching.
Oh yeah, yeah, and the whole like long season versus short season, that's a different discussion. But there's only a few shows that really continuously put in like the more bang for your buck on the long seasons.
Right.
But I will say that we referenced the the Arrow Cave. We actually coined that this time.
Yes.
Like in the show, as opposed to, because I think fans have been
We
calling
also
it
learned
the Arrow
that
Cave.
Oliver basically hates any nickname.
Right. Or like any goofiness. Because
Yeah,
it's like,
yes.
he called him, he's like, do you guys have an Aeromobile? That was one of my quotes.
Yes.
So, and I wonder, in this universe, we've established that there is a Wayne, like Bruce Wayne, or the Wayne Enterprises or whatever, exists. Is there a Batman in their universe?
We don't know.
Because if he's saying these things as like a throwback to like the Batcave or
And the Batmobile.
or the Batmobile, and he's just throwing these things out there like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, we wouldn't realize that was a thing unless there was because this is so campy and so goofy that there was a Batman and there was a Batcave and there was a Batarangs and stuff. So, like, I just wonder, in this universe, is there a Batman? In fact, there was a lot of people on Twitter in the Flash episode where Harrison is talking about Oliver, and he says, and that man, protects his city with vengeance and stuff. And people on Twitter thought he said Batman.
No.
And he didn't. He said Batman. But, anyway. But it's like, is there a Batman in this universe for him to take these, like, pop culture references from?
I don't know, and I don't know, like, if we'll ever find out. Like, it was an interesting article I was reading late last week, and I can't remember who it was. It was one of the creators, executive producers of the show, and he was asked, will Superman or Batman ever, make it onto the show? What he said was that we can't reference Gotham or Metropolis specifically. Like, they won't let us.
Okay.
Like, you will never, he said, you will probably never see a reference to Gotham or Metropolis on the show.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that there's not, because they're using Batman villains, it doesn't mean that they can't be a reference to Bruce Wayne, obviously, or Batman, or Superman. That also begs the question, if these shows exist in the same universe as Supergirl, how do they deal with Supergirl without, it being
in Metropolis?
In Metropolis, or there being a Superman.
Maybe, Metropolis was always kind of a stand-in for, like, New York and things like that.
But what about Superman? Like, she has never existed apart from Superman.
We'll have to see how they deal with that, because, like, that's a big question that I have, too, is, like, if you're not going to tie this to the movie universe, which they're not, and I don't necessarily want them to at this point.
Right.
But if they're not going to, how does she exist? Like, how does that work? Is it just that you've taken maybe parts of his Superman story and put them into the Supergirl story, like taking the best pieces of both stories and put them together maybe? Maybe that's the case, and that would be cool. I would like to see that kind of a take on it, So, I don't know.
I don't think that they're saying that none of the other superheroes in the larger DC universe, that they don't exist.
Yeah.
You just don't know about them yet,
Yeah.
So,
Or maybe in this universe, Batman exists much in the same way he does in our universe, where he's like a pop culture thing, where it's like they did have the television show, and that's how he came up with the Batcave or whatever.
Well, so think about, though, in any alternate timeline, where there's no Batman in the comic books, there would be some comic book character.
That's true.
They reference that all the time in the comic books.
That's true.
There are other heroes, fake heroes that people read about.
Right, that were invented back in the day. Yeah.
Right.
That would make perfect sense. But yeah, so that was just a complete side note. I'm sorry.
Yes. No,
did I derail
that was
the conversation?
No, that was a great conversation.
Okay. Anything else? Do you have anything else about it?
No, Hood's up definitely though.
Hood's up, dude. And again, I wanted to say I liked the situation whenever Caitlyn and Cisco are sitting there with Felicity and Roy in the club, and they have this whole conversation about why they don't take it seriously.
Oh
why
yeah,
they didn't take it seriously.
It basically like illustrated the differences between both cities. One is a lot more lighthearted. It doesn't really feel necessarily real. I'm not saying Central City doesn't necessarily feel like this is a city that we could visit. It's very odd. And they were talking about how like the villains didn't necessarily seem real because of their powers, and all that's true.
Yeah. And that all of this existed under the surface as well, and that now they're just aware of it basically.
Right. I mean, it's the differences between the cities, and it's also the differences between the two shows.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's a very meta conversation.
Oh, it was. It's very self-referential almost. Yes. My hopes would be that Arrow becomes a little bit brighter because of this crossover.
Yeah.
And that maybe Central City becomes a little bit more real, because of this. Because it's as it is, like you said, it doesn't feel like a place you can actually kind of go to. Mm-hmm. It feels like a place that you would love to go to, but you can't really go there.
Yeah.
So like I almost think that maybe both of their universe crossing over could have some good implications and good effects on later episodes.
What I find interesting is the fact that we say that, we feel that, and the writers obviously know that because they're able to have that conversation with us. And it's just like, part of me is, glad that they reference it, but then the other part of me is also like, okay, well, if this is an issue, then let's address it.
Let's deal with it. And maybe we'll see that. Maybe they're slowly working their way into that or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. Hoods up, hoods down.
Hoods up.
Hoods up for sure, dude.
Yep.
I liked it, man.
Do you have any quotes?
I have a lot of quotes, but I'm gonna pick the best ones because there's a lot of good stuff in this one. Let me see. We want to see the Arrow Cave. And then he says, "We don't call it that ever." That was Felicity who said that. and then we have Roy who said, "Since when did we start selling admission to the Arrow Cave?"
Yeah,
I love how he calls it an Arrow Cave. Let me see. We have Diggle and Lila. Lila says, "I appreciate the offer, Johnny, but we have it handled." And he says, "Is that your 'we have it handled' alarm?" Whenever it starts going off. And then the best quotes of this one were, "When we agreed to Restain, we decided it would be on my terms. If that is proving too difficult for you, you know your way back to Central City." Mm-hmm. That was a good one. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes they don't see it, as what Oliver says. Then Lila says, "There are people in the world who deal in extremes." And then Oliver turns around and says, "It would be naive to think that anything less than extreme measures would stop them," which is a quote that he's using from Waller.
Yeah.
Which was a really interesting interchange between them. It's the first time that Waller has like appealed to his sense of logic, I guess.
I think she's always been there. We just didn't know that it was her.
No, I mean she's been there. Like we kind of knew that she put her in this position. But she's not been hands-on, and she's definitely not been as directly manipulative of him.
But I think that it's always been apparent that the reason that they butt heads is because they are kind of alike.
Yes.
She's just more like him on a grander scale.
Yeah, where he deals with smaller things like the city, she's dealing with the world.
Right.
And then we have directly after that, it says, "Sometimes bravery isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be bold." And then Oliver says, "No matter the personal cost." And then the last one that I will say, because we've said a couple other ones earlier in the episode, we have the one where he says, "I get it, Barry. You're fast," whenever they're fighting. So that was really funny. Because like they're bantering back and forth, and Barry keeps like doing these things and just egging him on. And then finally it's like, "I get it, Barry. You're fast."
Yes. He has to maintain his cool around the Flash.
He does.
Flash will heat you up.
He'll get you all heated up.
Yeah.
Dude, so who would win in that fight? Like that particular fight. Not the one previously, but the one at the end of the episode.
I think Arrow, obviously, just because what you said on Flash.
Yeah.
Where like, yeah, he's fast and he has powers, but Oliver can outwit and outsmart him, much like Batman can.
And knows his weaknesses too.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
Oliver wins.
Oliver wins, and I think in this universe, because they can't reference Gotham or whatever, Oliver kind of is a stand-in for Batman to a certain extent.
Yeah.
He takes some of those Batman-esque attributes.
Yes. Well, that's it for this week. You can find our Flash on Target podcast at stayontargetpodcast.com. You can also find our regular podcast there as well. You can find us online, stayingtargetpodcast.com, Chris Wright 250 on Twitter.
And John Wright 777.
That's it for this week. We'll see you next time on
Arrow on Target.